Welcome to a journey through American history that's rarely told in full. Today we're exploring the final chapters of every woman who served as First Lady of the United States. These stories reveal not just how they died, but the fascinating circumstances surrounding their deaths. Let's start at the very beginning with Martha Washington, America's first First Lady. After George Washington died in December 1799, Martha was left in a peculiar and terrifying situation. George had directed in his will that all his slaves be freed upon Martha's death. Imagine realizing that your death would trigger the freedom of hundreds of people. Martha became genuinely frightened for her life, worried that someone might hasten her demise to gain their freedom sooner. So on January 1, 1801, she made the extraordinary decision to free them all immediately, a full year before her own death. Martha passed away on May 22, 1802, at age 70, her health having failed in the months following her decision. Moving forward, we encounter several forgotten First Ladies who never actually served in the White House. Martha Jefferson, Thomas Jefferson's wife, died 4 months after giving birth to her last child on September 6, 1782, years before Jefferson became president. Jefferson was so devastated that he destroyed most of their correspondence and never remarried. In one letter he wrote that he had lost the cherished companion of his life, in whose affections he had lived 10 years in uncheckered happiness. Then there's Rachel Jackson, wife of Andrew Jackson. Her death was particularly tragic because it was directly linked to politics. During the 1828 campaign, Jackson's opponents viciously attacked Rachel's character in the press, bringing up old scandals about their marriage. Rachel was deeply dismayed by the negative attention. She was actually preparing to leave for Washington when she suffered a fatal heart attack and died on December 22, 1828. She was buried in her inaugural gown, a dress she would never get to wear to her husband's inauguration. Andrew Jackson, known for his fierce temper, never forgave his political foes for what he believed was their role in killing his wife. Anna Harrison faced a different kind of tragedy. Her husband William Henry Harrison was elected president in 1841, but she was too ill to travel to Washington for his inauguration. She was preparing to follow him to the Capitol when devastating news arrived. President Harrison died of pneumonia just 30 days after delivering his inaugural address. Anna never served a single day as First Lady in the White House. She outlived her husband by 23 years and also outlived all but one of her children. Letitia Tyler holds a somber distinction as the First Lady to die while her husband was still in office. She passed away at the White House on September 10, 1842, following a stroke. She was only 51 years old, making her the youngest First Lady to ever die. Her death occurred in the actual executive mansion, one of only 3 First Ladies to die within those walls. President John Tyler remarried just 2 years later to Julia Tyler, who became the First Lady to marry a sitting president. Their marriage raised eyebrows due to their 30-year age difference. Julia's path to the White House had its own tragedy. She had initially refused Tyler's marriage proposal multiple times. What changed her mind? Her father was killed in a gun explosion during a presidential party cruise aboard the frigate Princeton. The shared grief brought Julia and President Tyler together, and soon they were married. Margaret Taylor, wife of President Zachary Taylor, was an intensely private woman who avoided public attention during her time as First Lady. President Taylor died suddenly at the White House on July 9, 1850, after suffering what was likely cholera or another gastrointestinal illness. Margaret was devastated by his unexpected death. She left Washington quickly and quietly, retreating from public life entirely. Just 2 years later, in 1852, she died at her daughter Betty's home in Mississippi. Interestingly, her grandson later disputed claims that she smoked a pipe, insisting she actually couldn't tolerate pipe smoke at all. Abigail Fillmore, wife of President Millard Fillmore, was a woman who preferred books to parties. She established the first White House library in the Yellow Oval Room on the 2nd floor, where she held more intimate gatherings instead of large social events. Standing for long periods at big White House receptions caused her great pain. 24 days after leaving the executive mansion, Abigail died, her health having deteriorated rapidly after her husband's term ended. Jane Pierce experienced perhaps the most horrifying trauma of any First Lady. Her only remaining child, her son Benny, was tragically killed right before her eyes in a train derailment just outside Andover, Massachusetts. This nightmare happened right after Franklin Pierce won the presidency. Jane draped the White House and her husband's entire presidency in black and gloom. Her overwhelming grief spawned rumors of witchcraft and the supernatural that plagued most of her time in Washington. Mary Todd Lincoln lived through unimaginable tragedy. Beyond witnessing her husband Abraham Lincoln's assassination, she showed signs of mental illness and became entranced by spiritualism, the popular 19th-century belief that the dead are ever present. Her mental state deteriorated so severely that her own son Robert had her committed to an insane asylum. However, a trial later found her sane, and she was released. She spent her final years haunted by loss and grief. Lucretia Garfield's time as First Lady was marked by an extraordinary display of devotion under the worst circumstances. In May 1881, while she was battling life-threatening malaria, she received word that her husband President James Garfield had been shot. Barely recovered herself, she spent the next 80 days caring for him constantly. President Garfield died after just 200 days in office, and Lucretia gained widespread admiration for her devotion and tireless nursing during his final months. Caroline Harrison, wife of President Benjamin Harrison, became the second First Lady to die in the White House itself. She died of tuberculosis on October 25, 1892, while still living in the Executive Mansion. Her death occurred during her husband's presidency, cutting short her time as First Lady. Ellen Wilson, first wife of President Woodrow Wilson, had interesting quirks during her pregnancies. While her husband was teaching at Bryn Mawr College in Pennsylvania, she insisted on going home to Georgia to give birth so that her children would not be born Yankees. Despite being a descendant of slave owners, she worked to improve housing conditions in black neighborhoods. Her time as First Lady was tragically short. She died on August 6, 1914, after battling Bright's disease, becoming the third and final First Lady to die within the White House walls. Her death came just a year and a half into her husband's presidency. Florence Harding, wife of Warren G. Harding, passed away on November 21, 1924, at age 64. Her death came about a year after her husband died suddenly in office under mysterious circumstances. Florence had been a dominant presence in her husband's political career and life. Lou Hoover, wife of Herbert Hoover, died on January 7, 1944, at age 69. She had been an adventurous and accomplished woman who spoke multiple languages and was involved in humanitarian work throughout her life. Eleanor Roosevelt remains one of the most influential First Ladies in American history. After Franklin D. Roosevelt's presidency ended with his death in 1945, Eleanor continued her public work for another 17 years. Her health began deteriorating in 1960 after she was hit by a car and her blood work showed concerning results. She had a family friend who was a doctor treat her, even though he wasn't qualified for her condition. She managed to attend John F. Kennedy's inauguration in January 1961, but became very sick in October 1962. Doctors discovered she had incurable tuberculosis of the bone marrow. True to her stoic nature, she didn't want extensive treatment. Eleanor Roosevelt died on November 7, 1962, exactly 30 years to the day after Franklin's election as president. Her death brought President Kennedy, former Presidents Truman and Eisenhower, and Vice President Lyndon Johnson to Hyde Park for her funeral. She was buried in the Rose Garden next to Franklin. Bess Truman, wife of Harry Truman, was famously private and avoided the spotlight throughout her husband's presidency. She lived to the remarkable age of 97, dying in 1982. She held the record as the longest-lived First Lady for many years. Mamie Eisenhower, beloved for her warmth and her signature bangs hairstyle, died in 1979 at age 82. She had been a popular First Lady during the 1950s, embodying the era's ideal of American womanhood. Jacqueline Kennedy's story took a dramatic turn after President John F. Kennedy's assassination in Dallas. After he was shot and killed, many expected JFK to be buried in his home state of Massachusetts. But Jackie ensured he would be buried at Arlington National Cemetery instead. She lit the eternal flame at his grave, which continues to burn today. The grave overlooks the Washington and Lincoln monuments. Tens of millions of people have visited since it opened to the public in 1967. Jackie Kennedy herself is now buried next to him, reunited in death. Lady Bird Johnson formed especially strong friendships with other First Ladies. When she died on July 14, 2007, in Austin, Texas, the largest number of living First Ladies gathered to honor her, reflecting the deep bonds she had created with these women who shared the unique experience of serving in that role. Pat Nixon, wife of Richard Nixon, died on June 26, 1993. Although she was living in New Jersey at the time of her death, her funeral and burial were conducted at the Nixon Presidential Library in her native Southern California. Two former First Ladies who lived relatively close attended to pay their respects. Betty Ford was another First Lady who formed genuine bonds with her fellow First Ladies, going beyond superficial political connections. When she died, this was reflected in a remarkable way. All but one of the living First Ladies honored her by attending her funeral and burial. The events were uniquely separated, with the funeral held in Palm Desert, California, and the burial in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Not all the First Ladies could attend both events, but their presence demonstrated the respect and affection they held for Betty Ford. Nancy Reagan, wife of Ronald Reagan, was known for her fierce devotion to her husband and her Just Say No anti-drug campaign. She died on March 6, 2016, at age 94. Her funeral brought together multiple living First Ladies and presidents, showing the continued tradition of these women supporting each other even after leaving the White House. Barbara Bush, matriarch of a political dynasty, died on April 17, 2018, at age 92. She had been in failing health and made the decision to decline further medical treatment, choosing comfort care at home. Her death was marked by an outpouring of affection from across the political spectrum. Rosalind Carter was the most recent First Lady to pass away. She had been a tireless advocate for mental health awareness throughout her life, both during and after her time in the White House. Her funeral in 2023 brought together all 5 living First Ladies at the time: Melania Trump, Michelle Obama, Laura Bush, Hillary Clinton, and Jill Biden. 4 of them attended the services together, creating a powerful image of unity across different administrations and political parties. Dolly Madison deserves special mention as one of the most beloved First Ladies in American history. After James Madison died on June 28, 1836, Dolly had been married to him for 42 years. With him, she had found economic security and discovered great talents within herself as a hostess and political figure. She spent her widowhood in Washington, living across the street from the White House. When she died on July 16, 1849, her funeral was a major event. Fellow former First Lady Louisa Adams attended, and almost certainly the incumbent First Lady Peggy Taylor was there too, since she worshipped daily at St. John's Church where the funeral was held. President Zachary Taylor himself also attended, showing the enormous respect Dolly commanded even years after leaving the White House. Her remains were later moved to the Madison Family Cemetery at Montpelier. These stories reveal something profound about the women who served as First Lady. They faced death in the White House itself, endured the assassination of their husbands, buried children, battled chronic illnesses, and lived through personal tragedies that would break most people. Yet they continued to serve, to support, and to contribute to American history in ways both public and private. From Martha Washington freeing slaves before her death to Eleanor Roosevelt working until tuberculosis took her life, from the 3 First Ladies who died within the White House walls to those who lived decades beyond their time in office, each woman's final chapter tells us something important about her character, her era, and her legacy. Their deaths, like their lives, are woven into the fabric of American history, reminding us that behind every president stood a woman whose story deserves to be remembered and honored in its entirety.